It's another 2026 Monster Energy AMA Supercross preview on Vital MX, and it's this episode where you will find the true beauty in the 2026 season. Because yes, there are so many elite riders and championship contenders, but the list from 6th place down is much more extensive. There are a ton of storylines, a ton of parity, and we're going to get into all of those riders on this episode, starting with the guys that we left off on the previous part 1, Malcolm Stewart and Aaron Plessinger, and those two are positioned quite interestingly next to each other. Both have recently secured their first 450SX win, but yet I think if you were to quiz the general fan on whether they back AP or Malcolm heading into 2026, I think generally everyone would go Malcolm. Wouldn't you agree, Michael Lindsay?
I agree, even though they, again, both actually have a win last season, and Aaron, kind of bucks, I don't want to say bucks the trend, because it usually is for a winner, but there is that question mark of somebody that doesn't get a win till later in their 450 careers. Can you back it up? Or are they a one-hit wonder? Aaron's done it 2 years in a row now. Malcolm's only gone his first, and Malcolm's, been in the class quite a bit longer, but just judging by social media comment section, even the people that were a bit upset that we didn't include him in episode 1, which I will admit, when you consider Justin Cooper was in episode 1, it does blur lines. I think most people back Malcolm. I think the effect of Malcolm's win last year stands out more to people. Again, recency bias. I think there's even some people, if you question them, who won a race last year, they actually might forget that Aaron won a race, because they'll think of the top names, and then Malcolm kind of stands out as the big one race winner kind of thing.
12 podiums for Malcolm in his 450 career. 12 podiums for AP in his 450 career versus Malcolm's 7. So really that does paint a picture that AP, as well, he has one more win, of course, that paints a picture that AP is more of a threat. But I just don't feel like we're there with AP, and I don't know what the reason would be. Of course, in this instance, heading into 2026, you could argue that it's simply because he's coming off of a fairly serious illness, and therefore we would expect a slow start, whereas in comparison, Malcolm is coming off of a Paris win, the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So maybe it is a little bit of a recency bias, yet I do find myself feeling like this is more of an overarching theme than a flavour of the month.
I think the one that stands out the most, you said, is, again, a lot of people are going off of Malcolm's very recent success and flashes. But I think even if you really read into it, like you said, Aaron had a pretty tumultuous end to last season. And even him talking about the illness when we were at the KTM Media Day, like, he doesn't, he says he's getting a grip on it, but he wasn't exactly like, I'm back, I'm good to go. Like, we all know, even at that photo shoot, he had just gone back on the motorcycle. He rode very minimally. I think it's funny because I sit here and go, well, Aaron's done it again, like you said, where I says Aaron's 2 years in a row. That gives me a lot better feeling than Malcolm, where I hate to say it, even though Malcolm's had the flashes, the part that's taken him this long to get there, and how stacked the field is, even when you remove Jet. I don't know. Are we basically at the point of which one's going to do it and which one isn't?
Do you have a feeling that either rider, or both riders, or neither, is still on an ascension? Do you feel like either rider is still working towards a peak, or have we seen that and it's more of a question of how often will they reach their previously established peak?
I think, in my gut feeling, I feel like I've always known from a peak level that Malcolm's capable of a 450 win, where, up until even Aaron's first, we kept saying it could happen, but I felt like there was more of a question mark if Aaron could do it, where Malcolm, it's always been the skills, the talent, everything there is there to get it. We saw it even in the earliest part of his 450 career in heat races. But have they both hit their peak? I feel like Malcolm is floored. No, because Malcolm's got so much, again, whether you want to call it talent, whether you want to call it skill set, technique, I feel like Malcolm technically maybe hasn't hit his peak. Aaron, I'm a little bit worried, has already flirted with it. And when I'm thinking about this upcoming season, I'm just concerned with, how long it's going to take Aaron to get back to healthy. And I don't look at it as like, this is it. We've seen the best of Aaron. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a year to kind of get back to normal, if that makes sense. Like, if Aaron doesn't win this season, I'm not saying he won't ever win again. I'm just saying it might take him if the illness is as bad as it seems, it might just take him a bit to get going again.
Yeah, and equally that's relevant to Malcolm because pre-2025, Malcolm had dealt with a series of injuries, wasn't happy with his bike. He finally established some momentum, some positive momentum in 2025, only furthered by his Paris win. So Malcolm is now poised to take advantage of something that he's been lacking in recent times. So that would be a positive argument in Malcolm's case. If you want to be a naysayer, then you could say, well, he didn't win from years 2018 to 2025 and then got it done once in 25. So what's to say that 25 was the new rule rather than a flash in the pan?
Well, I think their tough one is how amazing the win was. It was Tampa, correct?
Yep.
I mean, to just dominate, chasing everybody in the whoops, to have such commanding presence during that race, and but then we followed, and it never. He had some decent rides after that, but nothing. It didn't really trend his whole season. Like he says, a wholly put together good year, but yeah, that kind of worries me about flash in the pan. Where I feel like when Aaron's win performance has been there, it's been close for multiple weeks. Like it kind of trends. Aaron's pace trends around that performance, where I didn't feel like Malcolm's did as much.
Very fair point. But does either rider get a win in 26? I think this is the first time I've ever done this, but I will back Malcolm to get one win, and I say no for AP.
I'm trying to think of what I said in the last episode because I already counted a win account, and I don't want to contradict myself.
That's a good point. I didn't include them either.
You did not, and that's the hard part. I got to stick to my guns, and it has. I mean, it's always plausible, but if I'm going off of statistics, if the field's healthy, this, that, yeah, I doubt it a little bit. It's completely plausible. I think of this upcoming list we are about to go through. Naturally, Aaron and Malcolm are the two most likely, and that's why we're starting the conversation with them. But there's a part of me that wants to say, in the immediate, no.
Yeah, okay, I will sway on my answer and say that I'll support what I said in the sense of this is the most positive and encouraged I've been by the chance of a Malcolm win in a Supercross season, yet with the field and the amount of oxygen that I expect the Chase, Webb, Tomac group to take up as far as wins goes, I'll say Malcolm will just miss out. Yeah. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is the most positive I've felt about him.
No, I agree, and I'm about to heavily contradict myself, and I think based on what you said, you kind of agree, is based on the season, minus if he hadn't won last year, based on the way he's trending, based on the team, the bike, his off season. Yes, if I was standing back and he hadn't won last year, I would say, hey, Malcolm is poised to potentially get a win. Like this is the potential, the best and most prepared he's been, even though he actually got one last year, just from all the factors leading into the season. But again, I'm contradicting myself by saying in the immediate, no, but that is nothing against Malcolm. I agree with you. I think this is the most prepared, the most potential, most excited I've been about him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And from two Motorex USA riders to another RJ Hampshire, does Hampshire automatically become an AP? Is that his region, or is that almost too much to expect at this early point in his 450 career? Equally, should we expect more?
I'm on the fence because I hate to say it, if it wasn't for MXON and then kind of his off season of him talking about getting humbled by the bike, I would maybe have a different opinion from seeing, even though himself immediately has said that pro motocross would be very different than Supercross. I had first thought, based on what we saw in MX, like a lot of people, the most RJ we'd seen, the most controlled, the most poised, the most one of the best versions we've seen of him in that sense of being controlled. I would have maybe said, hey, he'll build into this slowly. I expect pretty solid performances, but maybe no extreme flash in the pan. But then I don't know if RJ's also going to push himself like RJ of old. Maybe we see flash of the pan moments and also a few highlight reels. I hate to say it.
RJ is egged on a little bit by a mostly positive pro motocross season. Of course, his Daytona 450 debut, still his standalone 450 Supercross race. Also Spurs fans on, I do believe. But that Daytona race, come Anaheim 1, that would have been 1,043 days ago, which is wild how time flies. But in my mind, that almost
it was
renders...
more than two?
It was 23.
I thought it was 24. Oh my goodness.
So
Time flies. Wow.
to a degree, I do believe that renders the Daytona debut irrelevant. Of course, it still counts for something, but I don't know if it really is something to use as a litmus test.
It's always tough because it's not like Daytona is, it's not early in the season, but it's not deep in the season. I'd have to go back and double check. But, you have a few people out. You're coming off good 250 riding. You jump in. Somebody that jumps in with a 450 performance like that, you always get a little more concerned at the opener of the season. Again, the only person we have is Jet. You have a very stacked top end of the field, and it depends. Again, I get back to that. Does RJ take the opening rounds in stride? Whatever comes to him, and we just get through it? Or do we have moments where, we know he is capable of running top 5, but that top 5 right now is a very, very deep top 5? Do we get up there and just go, this is where I belong, and oversend it to do that, and it ends with highlight reel RJ? Or do we have an RJ just takes whatever it is? And I think he's totally capable if he gets through the couple opening rounds. I'm just worried, as much as he gets hurt and rides injured, and I think that's harder on the 450 even than the 250.
Yeah, well, post scapular injury, he will have had 5 or 6 weeks on the bike come Anaheim 1, so a mostly full off season. That's not too detrimental or too dramatic, I would argue. But keeping him in the AP and Malcolm category, it took Plessinger 36 starts to get a 450 podium. It took Malcolm 66. So using those numbers as a reference point, does RJ get a podium this year? And equally, how long does it take him? I think Malcolm is a little bit too long for RJ. I think he'll get there before then. But Plessinger's 36 is essentially 2 full seasons and 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, just going off of where Aaron was on 250 to a 450, I think Aaron was a better guy when he moved up potentially than RJ was at the time. So do you disagree with me?
I don't know. That's interesting. I've never thought of that. I think that's a very interesting debate that everyone would have a different opinion of.
I think it's more carrying the momentum. RJ or like Aaron was doing this in a building point in his career, made the move, got the titles, moved on kind of thing. So there's a part of me that thinks like Aaron had trajectory a little more than RJ. Although, RJ, again, I think has still transitioned to the 450 class phenomenally from the small sample size we have. I guess this kind of comes back to actually, I almost want to circle back with something with Aaron there. But yeah, if you ask me, is he going to get a podium this season based on those stats with Aaron or Malcolm? I want to say no, because my gut feeling is it would take RJ longer than Aaron to do it.
Equally, though, if you said that RJ was going to be on the same path as AP, it's crazy to sit here and go, well, yeah, if RJ's AP, his first podium is coming Anaheim 2 2028. That's wild to sit here and say, because it sounds unbelievable. Yet we have facts that prove that that's kind of the path for an A rider rather than an A plus rider, let's say.
I think the tough part is we go off that first episode of having 5 or 6 big names that should lock up the podium all the time, and then we're talking about AP, and then we're talking about Malcolm. Like, I'm saying can't have RJ, but it definitely takes the cards aligning to get one in this field in your first season. Again, I say this, him not getting a podium in the first season is not a negative to me. I think RJ is plenty capable. Him not hitting a podium wouldn't be a negative for me. I wouldn't sit back and go, this has been a bad opening 450 season for RJ by any means.
I think what will steer the narrative in a negative direction is RJ wears his heart on his sleeve. So I believe that we will interview RJ when he's just had a 7th in a main event, and we will say, RJ, 7th, amazing, you rode really well. And I think he himself will say, no, I should be on the podium. I know I've got the speed to be on the podium. And I think that will steer us and the rest of the community in a direction where we start to equally believe that RJ should be on the podium right now. I do believe that will have influence.
Me and you talk about this almost every year, and I compare this to like a NASCAR conversation or F1 or series. They're just much, riders and drivers, etc., are much more celebrated for progress and consistent top 10s and getting close to the top 5 and what those numbers mean versus moto. It's basically podium or bust. You're not on the podium a lot, and I respect it because you need that self-belief in this sport. But the riders that when they don't hit it just look as interviewers and go, was a terrible freaking night. But you got fifth. It's your third 450 Supercross. You got a fifth. Still terrible.
Yeah,
Like that.
It's just difficult to discuss these riders because realistically, at this point, Malcolm, RJ, AP, and the rest will be on the outside looking in for a podium, but they're also first in line if there's an injury, when there's an injury, which changes the landscape of this discussion entirely.
Let me ask you this about Aaron, and this kind of falls into, I guess we could look forward to the last episode, compare this conversation to the Justin Cooper conversation, and then even also compare this to RJ is, okay, with Aaron, back to partially what you said before, have we reached his ceiling? What do you think that is? Is Aaron just now, Aaron's been in this weird spot where he's just on these endless one-year deals. I feel like he's established in the class, but at times it doesn't feel like he is fully established in some people's eyes, or again, I don't know what people are expecting of him.
Yeah, and I think that
long term
puts a bit of a spotlight on both Malcolm and AP in 26, because I think they both need to continuously justify their position. Especially now Malcolm set the bar at wins. If he now doesn't win and doesn't come close, that will erase 2025 and his stock will adjust accordingly. Similarly, we can see that a win each year isn't really doing much for AP to establish faith within the KTM group. So I don't know that AP can get to a position, results-wise, where KTM feel as though their hand is forced with a multi-year deal. Equally, when do we get to a point where, and this will transition nicely into our next rider, which is Jorge Prado, KTM traditionally do have two 450 riders. So Prado landed in their lap to a degree. Are we in a little bit of a position where it could end up being AP or Prado come the future? Maybe not even 27, maybe 28. But is this maybe how the situation is setting itself up?
It is interesting because, like I said, the team traditionally is a two-man 450 team. If they want to go back to two 250s, two 450s, they eventually would. Depends, if Eli gets this year wants to run another year. Depends how Jorge plans out. Like, there's a weird part where you could say Eli everything could click. He runs just for some reason magically keeps going. He doesn't seem to be bothered by age whatsoever. He's very sick of talking about it. Gets another 2-3 years out of this. Maybe everything really starts to click for Jorge. And, the danger that I feel like Aaron's been in for a couple of years that potentially he could be pushed out of the team could happen. But then vice versa, what you're saying is Eli maybe only does 1 year and steps away. Does Aaron, I guess that's part of it. Like, okay, go back to the earlier part of this year where Chase was leaving and they didn't have other options. At one point, Aaron was the guy. And I do wonder that, like, if push comes to shove, can Aaron become the guy for KTM? Because, like, they had that with the Dunge and Marvin situation. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you feel like in that era that Marv was more likely to pick up the torch where when it was like, okay, whenever Dungey leaves, Marv can pick up this torch and carry it as the team leader. But I don't know if I feel that with Aaron the same way it is that era.
Yeah, and also Marvin was immediately a race win contender, podium contender in 450s, whereas AP took a while to get there. And circling back, I do believe we've seen what AP's peak in Supercross, at least, looks like. I don't think that any of the KTM brass would put money on AP leading the brand into the future. That's most likely Jorge, and in an ideal world, Eli for a second year. The difficulty for KTM is all of those names are very volatile situations. Tomac may retire, Prado may never figure out Supercross, and AP may just be AP. So they don't really have much security in their lineup, and to make it worse, there isn't really a rider outside of that trio that they can nab for 27 to bolster their lineup. They haven't really got a 250 rider in the wings ready to go. The market is saturated as it is. There will be top riders leaving more so than top riders coming in, which will mean that it will become harder to get a championship contender. So the whole KTM lineup is actually a fascinating bit of discussion for 2026, even though we haven't turned a wheel on the track yet. But speaking of Prado, our poster child, in fact, for 26, because he uses DeCal Works, Fox Racing, and Motorex USA. So he really is our guy through and through. The pink is no more, though, sadly. We've ditched pink for bright orange and a bit of yellow, which you'll see when he hits the track at Anaheim 1. I'm sure he'll be wearing that. That's been his go-to all off-season. How do we view Prado? That's a wide-open discussion. How do I even start that? But how do we view him, let's say?
Well, okay, from a beyond just the track, somewhat backed into a corner because of everything that's been said, everything that's been done. It reminds me of you don't watch Stranger Things, do you?
No.
There's this character, Derek. He goes from being delightful Derek to dipshit Derek to back to delightful. That's how I say when Jorge has to be delightful version of himself right now and not cause any problems. I don't know what to say. He's in the weirdest.
Let me do it this way then. Let me do it this way. So as I said, it took Plessinger 36 starts to get to a 450 podium. Malcolm 66. Do you expect Prado to figure it out sooner than those numbers because of who he is, or is he going to take that long?
No, it's if he hasn't hit a podium by then, no offense, he's probably going back to Europe. Like, he is of the caliber, even though, he said he's going to stay and figure number out. Like, he is that good. I get it that some people are going to be negative, and like I said, I think all last year in outdoors, me and you would go back and forth on this. Like, I very heavily disagree with how he's handled things so far. However, from a pure sporting standpoint, skill standpoint, everything, this guy is capable. He is capable, period. If he has not, he's either going to hit a podium before then, or he should probably go home. And I don't mean that as a dick America. Come on, that's how good he is. If he hasn't hit a podium by then, I'm baffled.
I think he would agree that he needs a podium this year, but I also don't believe it's that dramatic. I think a solid season with a top 5 or 2, a lot of top 10s is fine. I think that's a perfectly fine stepping stone. You've got to remember, he's heading into his 8th 450 start. And in those 7 previous starts, I think he's had 1 top 10, of course 1 heat win as well. Heat races will also be where you can get a good gauge of where Prado's at, because a couple of heat wins and, even Anaheim won 2025, his 2nd place in the first heat race, I believe, that was kind of his crowning moment. So it doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of a main event trophy, in my opinion. We're still early enough in his development where it just needs to come in some form elsewhere with flashes here, there, wherever. Can he get a podium in 26?
From us, again, going back to the skill point, yes. Because if you ask me, again, him and RJ, a bit similar in the aspect, if you go up to him and go, you got top 5 tonight, they're not going to be happy. Jorge already wasn't last year, even though, I don't want to say we're painting the narrative, we're just being honest, kept telling him, like, hey, this is great, you're getting there, and just, he absolutely refuses to hear it. Yeah, because because I don't view him and RJ on the same level. I say RJ probably doesn't get a podium this year, but there's a part of me that wants to say Jorge will, just from a skill set standpoint, seeing what he can do in a heat race and everything. Like, he should. However, I agree with you. If it doesn't happen, it isn't the end of the world to me. He also still just needs to figure this out. Again, he's traveling a very rough path, a path that is unknown, by going straight into 450 SX. It's just, it hasn't really been done in the last, from somebody coming from GPs over, it hasn't been done in like 20 years. And the last 2 names we can name, were arguably somewhat successful, but not the success, that he's hoping for.
I think heading into Anaheim 1, I would set a clear line to say anything worse than 12th, I will look on negatively. 12th and up, to begin with, I'm good with. If he comes 11th at Anaheim 1, that's fine. That's completely fine. I guess the 12th place line essentially means he can't be worse than he was on the Kawasaki, which he shouldn't be, because he's another year on in his development, and per him, he's had a issue-free off-season, whereas last year, he rode 11 days pre-Anaheim 1.
Yeah, got hurt like 3 times in a row.
So actually,
I'm kind of on the number.
Consider that. Second in the A1 heat race, hovered around the top 10. He was a 9 to 12 guy for the most part. Considering the lack of experience, the lack of testing time, all of that stuff, actually, it was quite good. That should give you some confidence for 26.
I'm fairly confident with the West rounds just because of experience. I am very curious, since we didn't get to see him race at all on East rounds at all. That's kind of a spotlight mid-season. I'm really curious to see how that comes around, but I think I'm in a similar range of you, like an 8 to 12, 6 to 10 range is completely fine for me, the opening rounds. It should drift into top 5s. It should have some good heat race moments. We just need to get there. He just needs to get through the whole season. If that's where my number one, I guess if you say what's a failure for Jorge in Supercross is just not getting through the season. And it'd be different if he makes 15 of 17 rounds and has a minor injury and goes out. But if he makes it 4 races in and cartwheels out of the season, that's not good.
Yeah, does that play on his mind? Does that stop him giving it his all to begin with? And do we see a reserved Prado who is finishing 11th but is capable of 8th? Maybe. I don't think that's out of the question. And truth be told, it's probably the smart play. So from Prado to the man replacing Prado at Monster Energy Kawasaki, there is low-key Garrett Marchbanks hype as we enter 26. Flying at the test track has been thrown around. He obviously has some experience on a 450, not in Supercross, but there are 22 450 MX starts to fall back on. I honestly am at a loss with what we should expect from Garrett. I don't know, because on one hand, I could see this being quite difficult, especially when everyone's healthy. But on the other hand, everyone seems generally very positive, and I'm kind of getting swept up in that a little bit.
Kind of the same. There's an initial gut feeling having, he stayed in SoCal all last year, so I've seen him ride quite a bit in the last 12 months specifically. And, on one hand, I'm the guy that will tell riders that say I'm too big for a 250 in Supercross to shut up, considering what Malcolm did at one point in his career. But I've also seen how Garrett has to ride a bike. Like, Garrett really particularly wrings a 250's neck completely out. And there's points where I watch him, I'm like, yes, if this guy was on a 450, he can go faster. He is held up by what the bike can do. So there's an initial gut part of me that's like, yeah, he'll be great here. I think something that really helps is how close he already was to the. It's not that big of a transition. He's already been around Brock, all those guys a ton all year. He seems, from talking to him, very relaxed with the situation. Even though, like, I guess, yeah, on one hand, some people could look at it and say this is a little bit make or break for his career, and some people are just like, hey, if it works out this year, cool. If it doesn't, he just goes back to PC or something. So with all that said, I'm waffling because I'm in the same position. I don't know whether to say, I don't know, 5th to 15th? We got a big window here?
Yeah, I don't know. First and foremost, I really would like to know what the terms are of this Kawasaki deal and what the accelerator is to get renewed for the 2027 season. Because it sounds like it's not overly easy, but it's also not overly hard. It'd be very curious to know what Kawasaki have outlined as acceptable, per se. And for me, I think that's just consistent top 10s. I don't necessarily expect him to be top 5, maybe when we get to Denver and the field has been cut in half. For Kawasaki as well, you've got to remember, they've not had a win since 22. So there's a lot of emphasis on chase. So to a degree, I think that the best thing Garrett can do for Kawasaki is just be on the track for 17 weeks, float around the top 10, and be the solid second rider, which they've lacked for years now, because obviously AC also had constant injuries and troubles. Help Kawasaki get back to a position of stability. Chase will hopefully do his task, and that should, in theory, take the pressure off of Garrett.
I was going to say the biggest thing for the team, I know somebody that's close to him and around the team stuff that made a joke to me. They're like, I hope that the team realizes that their number quote was like an 8th overall in Supercross and 6th or 5th overall in outdoors would be really good. And the best thing he can bring to the team, and I think it's one of the most, it goes back to why he was the most obvious choice, is, like you said, Chase is the project. Chase is where the energy needs to be placed. Not to say Garrett just needs to get pushed to the side, but Garrett seems to get along with these guys so well. He just needs to bring consistent results and allow them to work. I hate to say it, on the project. Like, he needs, yes, if he can keep building and keep growing, that's fantastic. But the more pressure he can take off of those guys to be able to let them focus on basically, maximizing their return with Chase could also be considered, a pretty big positive within the team. When they look back at the end of the year and go, cool, Garrett, let's say those numbers, like Garrett's a 8th to 5th place guy, 8th to 6th place guy in championships and results, everything. But the biggest thing is that he was super supportive. This is great. This is a great situation. This is better than what we've had before. We can actually have a 2-man team here that functions together really well.
And all of that sounds great, except for the fact that there's this Levi Kitchen guy that could scupper any of those low-key plans. And, I mean, it'll also be quite a good test of Garrett's mental strength, because you can imagine where Garrett's going, yep, I'm 7th, the team is happy, everyone's getting along, this is fine. And then your mind could drift to, oh, but Levi's winning West. He's going to want to do this, so I should probably step it up. I probably need to get inside the top 5 to really just secure that. And then, it's quite easy to spiral. So it's quite, again, similar to what we said about KTM, the whole Kawasaki hierarchy, basically below Chase, is wide open and very interesting to theorize on. And I don't necessarily know what the best play is for Kawasaki. I would argue, and this will almost seem critical of Garrett, the best play for Kawasaki is to get Levi winning in 26 and onto a 450 in 27. And Garrett has to contend with that.
Yeah.
So
I think the bright side, though, is if they get a known quantity, even if they're pretty happy with Garrett, I mean, even though it's 2 separate programs, I mean, the separate thing is, hey, Garrett has a great season with us. If Levi's on the track to make the move to the 450 and do it successfully, then you just swap them in a sense. And then you also have a great built-in quantity and knowledge with Garrett. If guys get hurt, move him back up. If you want to move him for outdoors, if, let's say in another year or 2, Chase moves on or Levi moves on or something, like if things work well enough with Garrett, maybe, because Cowie's kind of been known for, I mean, at one point they called Joey again, like they kind of keep some of those B guys within what do you want to call it, within their little circles. So, I mean, no matter what, even if, let's say Garrett has a great season, but ultimately is superseded by Levi, it's also not the end of the world.
yeah, it's just complex. I think you can slice it many different ways, come up with many different vantage points, POVs, and yeah, I don't know. And it's a shame, really, because the Kawasaki brass aren't the most forthcoming with interviews and whatever else, but it would be great to sit down with those a few times this year and get their perspective on how it's all going and how it plays. And finally, on this situation, to your point about them phoning Joey before to come back, I think that's exactly what they are trying to avoid now, because that isn't a signal of internal kumbaya, that's a signal of instability, and they have to get away from that. They have to. Because it's just been a rocky road. And it starts with the first Chase Sexton win, which, all things being well, should come by the second month of 2026. The longer we have to wait for the Chase Sexton first win in green, and therefore Kawasaki's first win since 22, the more the instability will start to rupture and the ground will perhaps shake around the Monster Energy Cowie rig. So, from one unstable situation to a very unstable situation, or stable, question mark? Because we're very conflicting reports on what the Ducati boys are feeling and doing. Very different sides of the coin. Ferrandis is in love. He's fallen head over heels and he's embarking on a beautiful journey with the Italians, whilst Barcia, as we record this on December the 30th, has just gotten back on a bike. Add in the new manufacturer, the new situation, the new team, in a sense. I don't know what to expect from these riders, and I would have just tossed them aside on this episode and almost not even referenced them occupying a wait-and-see position. But Ferrandis talked a mighty big game in early December, which means that we have to throw him into the discussion. So what says you?
Well, into a conversation I had somebody within the program this was right around that time your Dylan conversation, because I think it was the next day I had this call, was, they basically told me if it was 2 weeks ago, I would have told you we would be worried about being a top 15 team based on the last 2 weeks of work. I'm not worried that we can be a top 5 and podium team from the get-go. My concern
is the get-go, and this would almost mirror what happened with Ducati and MXGP in 25. The get-go, I think, will be smooth. A lot of testing time in the off-season with hard-packed tracks. You kind of know what you're getting yourself into. But Ferrandis also did reference in that discussion that it's been difficult getting parts across from Italy, and there's been a bit of delay with that. So my question would be, what happens when we have our first hiccup and we have our first big test day on Monday, where we then need to wait to get parts in, and that could be where it starts to snowball. Yeah. So actually, my prediction for Ferrandis, at least, Barcia is his own situation. My prediction for Ferrandis is that the get-go will be arguably the highlight, the bright star in the 2026 season. And the real critical thinking moment will come when he has his first 16th and is talking to the press afterwards saying, yeah, we have work to do. Because that work isn't going to be as simple as it is with the other factory teams.
Well, and I'm picking apart points of each of their career, but take Dylan's last new team experience with Phoenix Honda. Arguably, its biggest peak was the very beginning, the first couple rounds with the bike, when everything was kumbaya was the best, and then we started chasing. And then, of course, take Justin Barcia's kind of later half of his career. Some of the highlights are how the season, like I said, he's in a different situation because of his injury, but he's typically started seasons well and then had dips and comebacks. So like I said, I'm not going to be shocked if Ducati has a very good, strong January. It's, but then the bigger test will be how does February and March come through.
And equally, to support that, per the MXGP team, the Desmo 450, and this is outdoors, so apples to oranges to a degree, but we also don't have much to go on with the manufacturer. To a degree, with the MXGP boys, the more they did to the bike, the worse it got, and the more confusing it got, and the bigger hole they dug. The beginning, when it was fairly limited and they were fairly in a box relative to stock, was the most positive and easy time to work with a machine. So I could also see that translating to 2026 Supercross.
A bit. Already from what I've seen, the package compared to the MXGP team we're talking about, or that time, is the package they are starting with is dramatically different than stock already. Like they've built a completely different window to work within. But to your point, I still think that the knowledge base is around the package they've developed, and the farther you get away from that, yes, the more confusing things can get. So depending how far they have to stray in the opening rounds, if they do, that can always happen, and you'll always get back to that. Well, when we were closest to the base at the beginning of the season, we understood the most of it.
Ferrandis has obviously had a head start versus Prado, versus Barcia. Barcia's done no testing, none of that, no experience with a Ducati. He's coming in basically at zero. We don't even know if he's racing Anaheim 1 yet, although he did say if he got back on the bike at this time, he would. So we can presume he will. So all that being said, come the end of Supercross, is it a sure thing that Ferrandis will be Ducati's top performer, or will Barcia build across the year and then eclipse Ferrandis' results in the latter 4 rounds, let's say?
I hate to waffle and say this. I got to see the opening couple only because I am concerned as I do watch Dylan. I think Dylan, likes some unique things to his setup. I just don't know if all the testing he's done is really going to translate to Barcia. If it does, there's a part of me wants to think Barcia will supersede him as the year goes on. But there's also a part of me, it's like, well, if it just flat out is off for Barcia, it might take him a vast chunk of the season to get to where he even needs to be.
Yeah, how about this then? Ferrandis was a 5th place rider on Phoenix. Can he do that on Ducati at any point?
Yes. Yeah, he could be a 5th place guy. I don't know if he'll be as consistent. Just back to the field, being deep, some of these guys being prepared, being on more prepared programs. There's a part of me that's like waffle. Yes, he can be a 5th place guy, of course.
I wonder if in a roundabout way, Barcia's lack of off-season testing could help him, because Ferrandis has clearly found a package that he's quite comfortable and happy with, which will maybe cause him to struggle when it comes time to stray from that, whereas Barcia will have no reference point and kind of just be going week to week and like, yeah, let's try that, let's do this. That might make him more adaptable as the season goes on.
The base. I agree with that in the sense of, let's say you give him whatever the refined package is right now. If he jumps on it and is pretty happy, he has also skipped a lot of headache to get there. And maybe when I say headache of, I've tried this, or we tried something similar, like a rider, gets a predisposition thought where if you have an issue at a race, they may come back and say, hey, we need to do this with the wheelbase, we need to do this with clamps, we need to do this with rake, or this. And the rider might go, well, we wasted time doing this before, and I didn't like it. But you also don't know how that affects now that the package has been refined in a different way, where Barcia will come in so fresh mind. If he's pretty happy with the first base package, and then round around, and if they run into a problem, they go, hey, we want to just throw this at it. He'll be like, cool. I'm actually pretty stoked where we're at. This is better than I thought. Let's go.
Yeah.
So yes, to your point, mentally he could actually, gain from it. And I think that's always the standpoint of like, Dylan's had to do the round of testing, but you could say the same thing about any team that has a really good test rider involved, whether it's Cowie with Tickle, whether it's Honda with Trays. If they eat through a lot of this stuff, you just don't spin out the riders, and they might be a little more fresh and open-minded when it comes to taking swings at the races, because some of this stuff you might suggest they may have not tried yet.
Barcia's last podium was 28 races ago, or 28 starts, I should say, for him. Ferrandis's was 38 starts ago for him. Does either rider get a podium this year? I think it's got to be no. You can't sit here with that much confidence when the bike hasn't started a race. You just can't, can you? Even when the field starts to thin out, I think I put Marchbanks more likely to podium than the Ducati boys.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, with Ferrandis especially, he didn't make it happen on Phoenix. So what's to say he would with Ducati? And then that's interesting as well, because Ducati with MotoGP, their DNA is winning. Can they accept that? Can they accept that? They did have 2 podiums in MXGP at least to fall back on. So would that be considered a step down from where even the MXGP program is? It's all very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Well, I'll swing one last comment on Ducati. If certain people there believe what some of the engineers told me, maybe is, I was impressed when I went to the bike launch that a couple of guys in the project admitted to me that they thought that motocross bikes were the most competitive field of product they had ever worked on. Basically, them stating that street, different levels of street, but everything they'd worked on before, they felt like it was easier to find a competitive advantage somewhere in the bike, where they felt like dirt was by far the most competitive market they had ever entered. So if they follow that same thought in racing, then hopefully, they're okay with the building period it's going to take to get there.
Yeah, sounds good. Moving on to a team that honestly will have my attention in 26, purely because I think it's one of the more interesting storylines just because of the cast beneath the tent. Quadlock Honda with Shane McElrath, Christian Craig, and Joey Savacci. All riders, well, first and foremost, let's start with this. How wild is it that of that trio, Shane McElrath is the only one with a 450 Supercross podium? You would never, if that was on a pub quiz, no one's getting that.
I wouldn't get that by a mile.
Now I regret not posing the question to you rather than just telling you.
I would have said, I will hate to say this, I would have said, even though there's a part of me that knee-jerk reactions wants to say, well, I mean, Christian's has been recent enough, we know it. There's a part of me that gut feeling almost would have said Joey at one point, thinking about Cowie, thinking about the Monster, like confusing the Monster Cup for something else. I would have said none of the 3 had a podium if you pop quizzed me.
Well, I think Joey had a lot of 4th places on Cowie, so you would just naturally be like, yeah, he was in the mix. I think he lost a podium in Minneapolis by like a lap or so from memory, but we're not talking about 2019 or whenever that was. So with that in mind, McElrath, Savacci, Craig, who's the top dog on our team? Who will be the top dog?
Yeah, I mean, based on Shane's recent form, I would have it's got to be between Christian and Joey, and I would have to say, out of the gate without seeing any of them hit the track, I want to lean towards Joey.
To be honest, I romanticize Joey and Christian in 2026. I would like to believe that they can both float around the top 5 and maybe get that elusive podium. I don't know if it's maybe just recency bias from seeing them in WSX, and obviously WSX, a weaker field. You see them with trophies, so you start to kind of get that in your head that it's possible. Maybe the reality of Anaheim 1 will quickly shut down all of these comments. But I would like to believe that Joey and Christian could have career years in the 450 class and really re-establish themselves. It's just going to be tough. And in that vein, I think it's important to remember WSX is its own thing. And therefore, a top 10 for both riders at Anaheim 1 would be good enough as a starting point.
Absolutely. I think in general, I said this right before we started the podcast, it's interesting to have this list here, and compared to years past where particularly like Yamaha or the KTM group had really solid B teams in a sense in the 450 class, that now Honda's really the only one with quad lock. Urive is building a number one, a really good program, but number two, potentially a place where, again, between the three people he has, if even one of the three has a very successful season, but if two of the three have it, I mean, if all three have whatever you would call on paper a successful season, it starts to build a very interesting place for people to go that know, hey, all these guys have had their struggles or been overlooked in certain programs and they all found success here. You really could build something that, the whole build it and they will come theory, like people will be drawn to quad lock, not over, I'm not saying over a 100% factory effort, but the guys on the outside looking in, or, okay, take a Garrett. Let's say he has an amazing year at Kawasaki and Kitchen does win the title and supersedes him. Maybe a Garrett would go here the following year or something like that.
I think we're already there with Quadlock being the ultimate backup option for a factory rider who's maybe going to fall off of the merry-go-round. I think that is without doubt. And to make it a little bit of a nitty-gritty episode of the podcast, of these riders, whose career is the most at risk?
Well, I actually had that question for the entire group, but are we only talking about Quadlock?
Yes, because I think Quadlock, you could argue that all of them are fairly in limbo.
Christian still.
Or...
I think Christian still is, because Shane, even though I could say Shane potentially could easily, I hate to say it, based on current trajectory, could have the worst season of three. Shane at least has, when I think of career, I think his overall career. Shane is still doing extremely well on 250s and Australian World Free Reeve and things like that. I think Joey is just very stable at this point. I think Christian is the most volatile in terms of his career. Because if he comes here, if Shane has an okay season, he's going to stay put, I would think, to an extent, because he has value elsewhere. Joey is similar, where Christian has a rough year here. Where does Christian go?
Yeah, and with that in mind, I think that now, after the struggles at Husky and Yamaha, I think teams would just be a little bit gun-shy with Christian, saying, I don't know if he would get on with our program. To be honest, on the opposite end of the spectrum, I still believe that there's a world where Savatgy kills it and a factory team says, yeah, let's bring him back into the fold. I think that highly of Savatgy, to be honest. And I feel like his path in 450s has been so interrupted, unconventional, that as a team you could sit down and say, well, he hasn't really had a fair shot, so we could give him that and take him to the next level.
And I was going to say example teams. I mean, at one point, Cowie still called him if he had a fantastic year. You look at somebody like maybe a Husky could take a shot at him. The other one is, okay, the two we just finished a conversation with, and I think you know this better than I do. Ferrandis is on a 1+1. I don't know if Justin's is a 1+1.
They're all 1 year deals. They're all 1 year deals.
They're all 1 year deals.
Apparently, everything at Ducati is a 1 year deal.
So, another example there. Okay, one of those two doesn't have a great season. Joey kills it. If there's on an immediate two, a really good up-and-comer, your Ducati, you go get Joey.
Yeah, true.
Like I said, Joey's in a position where he can bounce back out of this, where I think, Shane is where Shane is, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Shane has hit a great niche for himself and is performing well and continuing his career. I don't see him superseding back into the factory 450 level. And I also still have that same question mark about Christian. I think Christian can do great here and be very settled here and make something for, the rest of his career in a sense. But what you just said about Joey, Christian has a banner year. Does somebody at the factory level still? Well, I guess what I said, does Ducati come get him if he has a great season?
The Austrian group won't. Cowie's full. Yamaha won't. So you're on to Triumph and Ducati and those sort of brands. At least
Christian also has the Triumph option, I guess, where I would say, Joey's been there, done that, so the Triumph one's off the table for Joey.
Moving on to another rider who belongs in our conversation because his career is equally treading water, Colt Nichols. I feel bad for Colt Nichols. Who can forget his first race with Honda HRC as a fill-in? He got a 6th, I believe. Brilliant, showed a lot of potential. There was a lot of excitement in that moment. A recent 250 champion still. And since then, that A1 in 23, I believe, it's just not been there. And there's been injuries and setbacks, and there's been a lack of momentum. Is this a year that he can... Now, realistically, a top 5's probably a step too far. Podium, of course. But is this a year where he can just establish himself as a 9th place rider? Just consistently be there every week, knock off 9th places and be like, job done, that was fine.
I think he can. I'm also very curious with the overall, HEP conversation for the last couple of years. If you're the B on the twisted T side there, like Kenny has performed phenomenally, but nobody else has really ever. The program has gone better. The bike has gone better. Everything about that program has gone better. But of course, nobody has taken it to the heights of Kenny, and nobody has gone there and gone leaps and bounds better results than you would expect. Now, with Anderson coming in, that could affect it. On one hand, Anderson could have an okay season, and it may not. If like you said, if Colt comes out and is round a top 10 guy, maybe a little out of it. But if Jason doesn't get podiums, struggles to get top fives, then maybe it looks a little better for Colt. But if Anderson comes out and has a great season, that also, to me, even if Colt has an okay season, like there's, I think, outside factors that can affect how some people view Colt's season, if that makes sense.
Funnily enough, if there's a rider who I feel could benefit from Quadlock Honda, it is Colt Nichols. I think that would actually be a great spot for him. But yeah, I hope to see just Nichols find himself again, let's say, in 26. I don't think we're in a position to put a result on it. I don't think he is either. I think just he will know if he feels somewhat like he resembles himself, and that will be a marked improvement from where he's been previously. Justin Hill, 77 starts in the 450 class. How many top fives do you reckon he's had?
4.
5.
Okay, I was thinking 4 or 5.
That was meant to be more shocking, but I think it will be shocking.
You think? You thought I was gonna go high, or most people would go higher?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong Justin Hill fan base out there that believe he's capable of anything, and I think that the lack of substance there would surprise that contingent.
I think the tough one is, I guess I could say 4 or 5, because I feel like those 4 or 5 results are what people hang their hats on with him, and they all stand out kind of in my mind. But then I remember beyond that, it's an enigma, or it's an abyss. He's an enigma lost in the abyss, or however you want to say it. Like I really don't know. I had a conversation with him preseason last year where he bluntly said, this isn't quote for quote, but pretty close to it. Yeah, I'm getting later on my career, and I just really want to see how it would go if I really put in all the effort.
Well, it was the fastest qualifier in Arlington, so there is that.
What was the other round? Was it Phoenix? Was it Glendale, Big Rhythms? He was really strong. There was a couple rounds. Basically, if a track had big, long rhythm lanes, I was like, here we go. Justin Hill's going to qualify well. He's going to be great in a heat race. He's going to make somebody shrug and go, what the heck?
So how does he factor into this conversation? Does he? Is he just... He will upset the apple cart on the odd weekend. It won't be a consistent feature, and that will be the Justin Hill experience?
Basically, I mean, I hate to say it, of ever been on this list, he has the least, what's the word I'm looking for, like his results, other than if he just absolutely is just the worst he's ever been and is over it. Nothing I feel like he really does is going to affect, I still see people comment this, he should be the fill-in account, he should be this. I've asked him, he loves where he's at with Tedder. He's making decent money. He loves the programs behind him. He gets to do his thing. I don't get the feeling he wants to be anywhere else. They love him. They got a new rig this year. They're happy. He's just going to be Justin Hill, and it's going to be what it is. And that's kind of the end of it. I don't even want to give it predictions, and it also doesn't kind of matter what happens.
Okay, cool. I guess that's a nice place to be.
It's like I said, I like Justin as a person. There's going to be some flashes, but it's going to be same thing.
The complete opposite of that would be the Beta USA team. 2 very serious riders who are striving for more, looking to improve. You couldn't chalk and cheese compared to Justin Hill. I liked what I heard out of Mitchell Oldenburg at the media days, and I do also think that Oldenburg is criminally underrated.
Yes.
Benny has also taken big strides in the second halves of recent seasons. And there are a couple of people in the industry who have pegged Bloss to be the standout rider or the breakthrough rider in 26. There is a little bit of low-key hype there. Do any of these things happen?
Well, I'll give you maybe, I don't know if this is a shocker or a shocking comment to say. I rate Mitchell from a skill standpoint. I look at Shane McElrath's name, and I think even though Shane was closer, I think Mitchell's just as good as a Shane, for instance. I really do rate Oldenburg quite high from a skill set. I was super impressed that Mitchell, got on that bike last year being a bit of nice, he's not a small rider, but he's smaller of stature, especially compared to Benny, and having ridden the beta and being tall, I was kind of concerned, like, okay, the beta works well for Benny. I was really impressed how well Mitchell came in and made that program work for him. Of the two of them, I lean towards Mitchell to break out more than Benny.
Yeah, I think so do I. But then also, Benny has been very strong again in the second half of 25 and I believe 24 as well. So if he can find that in the first half and then build on that in the second half, then there's a roadmap to some success there. They've got new engines, Beta USA this year, so a little bit more power, a little bit more grunt for the start, which should help. That was always their Achilles heel. Another interesting, similar to Quadlock Honda, another team that I probably will watch a little bit more closely in 26, just because I think there's a beauty in these. I don't know what it is about 26, but for whatever reason, these lower level storylines are much more prominent in my mind, and I don't quite know why. But I'm not mad about it. I think it's going to make the overall experience much, much more interesting. You may not have heard a reference to a Yamaha rider in this episode, and that's because Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing is, of course, very top-heavy, and therefore all of their riders were in episode 1. But there is one Yamaha rider who is leaning on the power of the YZ450F, as many privateers choose to do, who we could discuss, and that's Ty Masterpool. But truth be told, I have really nothing to say other than let's just see how this goes.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. With Ty, I never know what he's even going to show up. He's riding YZ450 this week. He could be on another bike next week. He posted himself using one suspension company yesterday. I called the person he's using somebody else today. I don't know. I don't know whatever's going to happen with Ty.
He's made one good decision at least, and that is leaning on Yamaha Motor USA. So let's do our categories that we did do on the previous episode. Of course, we don't have a championship favourite in this one because that was the previous go-around, but some of them are still relevant. And once again, this is exclusively to this group. So let's do bold prediction, first and foremost.
Oh, bold prediction. Oh man, I lost my little list. No!
I'll do mine.
Do yours. I lost my list.
I don't know if this is bold because it's kind of alluded to already, somewhat. I think Austin Faulkner is a full-time 450 rider from this day on.
Yes.
And there is a mention of it in the PR. It doesn't feel like it was meant to be in the PR because it's only in Austin's quote, but Austin explicitly says, something like this should help me when we go back to 250 East if that's what we decide to do, which ultimately means it's up in the air depending on how it goes. And I do think that I don't know how it would need to go in order for him to do that. Again, he could be the victim of too high expectations because realistically, he's not hitting the top 8 through the first 6 rounds. I do not believe that. But that also doesn't mean it's bad. I think that anywhere, let's say this. If he's in the Prado range of 9 to 12 at the start, I think that is successful and worthy of investment to continue.
Well, the next thing I was going to say is I think there's a two-part to this. One is Austin's results and consistency, and I think the other one is how far along Deno comes, because I do think the program, from talking before they, going down the road, preferably a 2-man 450, 2-man 250 kind of operation seems to be where they're heading. And if Deno's also ready to make the transition, then you also have, and if Austin's performing well, then you have a pretty easy conversation there of, okay, it's Deno and Swole, either on East, Outdoors, wherever you weigh this out as, and Austin and Jordan as 450 guys. And then I just screwed up and forgot that Mickle's racing outdoors on the 450. Right after I said that, I totally forgot about Mickle.
Yeah, I guess that actually could influence it. And Austin, the path to Austin finishing the season on a 450 is actually quite confusing, because if he kills it, and it won't happen, but races in the top 5 in Angel Stadium and not Petco, what's that called? Snapdragon Stadium. And all of that. Yes, it would be amazing, but also I think if you're Triumph, you go, well, now he's going to contend in the East, so let's get him back down because this looks really promising. So it's almost like being mediocre could be the path to continuing on a 450, because then Triumph go, okay, the East title or wins isn't going to happen. he's better off just focusing on building the 450 program and gathering data for us.
Yeah.
A little bit of a complex one. And also, when does Jordan come back? Jordan, from memory, said that he expects to be back late Feb, early March. Now, typically, it does take a little bit longer than these riders speculate in advance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Jordan until late March. And at which point, you potentially have, if Austin goes down to a 250, you have you have Triumph without a 450 for 4 or 5 races. Is that a massive problem? That probably would dictate the way this goes.
I'm struggling here with my bold prediction now because I don't think my prediction is bold enough that I'm about to say.
Well, your prediction in the previous episode wasn't bold enough either, so you can just do another one.
Jorge Prado does podium a Supercross.
No, I think that's bold. It's just not surprising because you already said it.
It's
but
not
that is bold.
Because that's my bold. Because I look at the list and I don't know, like the Malcolm Aaron conversation. No offense, like I don't know how to say anything bold with a Nichols or a Hill. The only other one I want to lean on in terms of bold is, you already kind of said it, is Joey performs to such a level that he basically, I don't want to say reignites his career, but basically, gets people to reconsider his position. What I mean by that is last year he got 2 top 5s. A bold prediction for Joey would potentially be a podium or maybe 5 top 5s or more for the season.
Joey's good. I'm a Joey believer. I think it's taken me a while to get here, but I'm a Joey believer. Even if you look at when he was doing the first 8 rounds for Rick Ware on a Cowie 450, I think every result bar one was a 9th place and the other one was a 10th. Like he is rock solid. I would be interested to see what would happen if he was given a shot. This is a hard one. Biggest disappointment from the riders we've mentioned.
Well, I already made a joke that Hill can't be, no matter what he does, because he's just Hill. Biggest disappointment.
Can I jump in and take the obvious one of Ty Masterpool just disappears after like 2 weeks?
That's not disappointing. That's almost an expectation at some point.
That was a low-hanging fruit. Okay.
That was a very low-hanging fruit. My biggest disappointment.
How about
is?
Okay, you go if you've got one.
Craig.
Oh.
Potentially Craig.
Ouch.
Potentially Craig. Because it kind of comes to another conversation that I'd have to look at this list a little more carefully. I really feel like he is the most dangerous, he's in the most precarious situation, I feel like, of anybody here. So what I mean by disappointing is I hate to say it, I don't think it would take too much for him to just fall out of consideration with so many people, to just kind of fall off the radar. And it really because he feels like he's on the cliff edge with his career more than anybody in this group.
I have 2 hypothetical disappointments. Neither may count, but I'll give you them both.
And mine's hypothetical. I'm not saying I'm betting it's going to be Christian. That's just, he could hit it, I think, easier than most guys in this group.
It's cool, man. No one's coming after you. We're fine.
I feel like it was going to...
The bar has been set too high with Ducati based on Ferrandis' comments, and the stark reality will not reflect fondly on those words. Is that a disappointment?
No, that's not. I think you actually hit that. I hate to say it, but just Dylan's words alone, I think, affect what people would picture of the bike by a good couple positions in a race. Like a good 4 to 5 positions difference has been changed in people's heads because of Dylan's comment.
Okay, if we're not accepting that, then I'll do this.
Pre-Dylan comment, neither of them getting a top 10 inside the first 4 rounds I thought was very acceptable. But based on Dylan's comments, that doesn't seem to be the case.
AP's return to competition takes a little while to sort out, and through the first half of the season there's a lot of ebbs and flows and all of this, highs and lows, and some references to rebuilding and it being more difficult than imagined, and it takes a good couple of months before we see AP be AP. How about, I'll put a number on it, AP doesn't podium until round 12, which is risky because it looks like we're going to get some California mudders. So that is a risky pick.
If it wasn't for the mutters solely, I would agree with you, because, again, I go back to the way he was talking around. It's like, I'm not under the impression that everything is solved. I think he knows what the problem is, but I'm not under the impression that we're firing on all cylinders. And again, it'll take a little bit to get there.
Asterisk, doesn't podium before round 12 in a normal race. There we go.
There you go.
Most improved, final category. You can go first, or I can go first because I do have one.
I'm going to take the low. I've got low-hanging fruit with Prado. The other most improved, I actually think Nichols or Prado.
Nichols is a bit of a bold pick. I was going to say Christian and fly in the face of your previous comment because it wasn't good with Star. Like the results were 12 to 15, and I do think that as long as he makes it out of California, we are going to start to be 5 to 10. Yeah,
I guess that's true because I'm thinking long term, like because I agree with you on what Christian is capable of. So when I think of most improved, I'm thinking of where Christian's peak is. But I guess that's the same conversation with Colt. I'm going off of. You could say most improved is just improvement over what he did last year, which is the same as Christian. But it's like, oh well, Colt was also a top 5 guy technically when he first went with Honda. So
there's many different ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, I have one for you, and I've mentioned it multiple times. I already kind of said it, but to counter what I said earlier is if this group we talked about, whose career is in a sense, hangs in the balance, in your opinion, or could be affected long-term the most by what happens this season?
You're going to say Prado.
Well, I already said it with my biggest disappointment. I think Christian's in the most precarious position. I think Prado has another year of shelf life. Unless it goes horrendously bad, I think he has another year of shelf life of an allowance if it doesn't go well.
Okay. Well, you did say that if he doesn't podium, he may have to go back to Europe. So I was going off of that.
I said in the same amount of races it takes Aaron. So that gives him...
so you're saying he may have to go back to Europe in 2029?
Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for that.
I was saying that off Aaron's number, so yes, I'm not saying by the end of this year. Jesus, that's a little ridiculous.
I'll go Ferrandis because if this doesn't go well and they don't gel, then I don't see where Ferrandis goes next.
I agree with that. Yes.
So that would be my pick. Right, that is episode 2 of our 450 preview, and we are done with the 450 SX class. If you didn't find part 1, you can find it on YouTube and the same audio platform you're likely listening to this on. We'll be back real soon with a 250 SX West preview because we do have a very firm picture of who is competing there, from Rider D to Anstey to Deegan to Kitchen to Adams to a few others. It's a fairly concrete list, enough for us to do a preview. Thank you to DeCal Works, Yamaha Motor USA, Motorex, Fox Racing, and Yoshimura R&D for their support of this podcast. I didn't mention Yoshimura until now, but that's because we are all fixated on Anaheim 1, and we may as well have some Yoshimura exhaust strapped to us because we are powering forward into the new season at a rate of knots. But we'll be back real soon with another podcast. So thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you then.